Hey guys, this is AJ. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing good. And in our previous video, we made a character able to pick up items from the scene and using the sprite in the scriptable object, we made it appear in our inventory. And we were just using some yellow boxes for that. So I have just changed that to this Russia just kind of game object. And in this video, we are going to make the player able to drop the items from the inventory, and we are going to make them appear back near the player on the scene, and we are going to empty the slot when the player does that. So without further ado, let's get started. So for dropping the items into the scene, I have just renamed the folder where we had pickups into pickup and drop, and we are going to have the scripts for dropping the items in this folder. So we are going to basically use two scripts: inventory drop target and inventory item dropper. And first thing we got to do here is in the UI, for me there are two UIs, like one which has all the joystick select, reselect button, character selection things, the player attack buttons, jump, crouch, everything, which is called the game UI. And we have an inventory UI, which basically just has the inventory. So we are going to need to create a new panel here. And in case you have just the inventory UI and you don't have the game UI, you can just use the inventory UI for this. So here we are gonna create a new panel, and we don't need a canvas. We are gonna attach or child the game UI and the inventory UI to this panel. And we don't need an image for the panel, so let's just remove that. And we need to attach the inventory drop target to this panel. And this is because we want to invoke a method in this script when we move out of the inventory UI and say point our mouse to this region or anywhere but the inventory UI, or anywhere but the slots in the inventory UI. And we cannot do that if we have the game UI and inventory UI not childed to this, because then we are gonna have our game UI, which is again another canvas, and which is behind our inventory UI. So the mouse is going to point to the game UI, and if we have the script say on our inventory UI, it is not going to work. And you can also you can even attach the script to this UI, but this has to be a canvas or a panel, and I don't think it is going to work because this is just an empty game object. So that's why we need to add an extra panel here. Now what we gotta do is, here in the game manager, which has all my players, if in your case you have just one player, then you can have the player inventory script on the player itself, nothing to change there. But in case you have been following my videos and have made a character selection functionality, then you need to move the player inventory to the game manager or the game object, which basically is parent to all the other playable characters. Oh, and in case you have just a single player, you can just have it like we had in the previous video on the player. So I am just gonna change it to the game manager, and instead of tagging each of these player as player, I have changed the tag to untagged, and I have tagged the game manager as player. But yeah, again, in case you are working with just one playable character, you don't need to change anything. Everything is perfectly fine. And next thing is you gotta add the item dropper script to whatever game object you have as the player. If it is just a single player, you can add it to that player, else you gotta add it to the game manager where you have childed all the playable characters. Now let's go ahead and edit these scripts. So in the inventory drop target, we are just gonna inherit from iTrack destination. which is a script we have set up in the previous video. So go check that out if you haven't. And iTrack destination has two methods: add items and max acceptable. We are not going to be working on max acceptable right now because that's for stackable items and we haven't gotten to that part yet. But we are going to need an add item. And this is going to take parameters item and the number of items we want to add. And since we are getting an error because we haven't implemented the iTrack destination, we are going to just add this method here, max acceptable, which is again going to take an item. And in here we are just going to return int dot max value. Here what we are going to do is we are going to get the item dropper, which is on our player character, or in our case the game manager. Find game object with tag player, player dot get component item dropper, and we are going to call in this method drop item and passing the item that we want to drop. So now let's go to the item dropper and make this method. Here I'm just gonna delete the start and update and just create the drop item method. Now we are gonna need to spawn the item back on the scene when the player drops the item. So let's create a method for that. Spawn pickup item, and we need a location where we want to spawn this item. Where pickup equal to item dot spawn pickup, which again if we check the item script is a method which we have already made. So in here we got the spawn pickup method and it is just going to instantiate the pickup at the position. Oh, instantiate the pickup and then set the position to the position we are passing down here. So here we just pass down the spawn location and that's it. Now let's also just make a method to get the spawn location. Vector 3. Let's call this get drop location. And this is just gonna return a location where we wanna drop the item, say like in front of the player, maybe with an offset of 3. So in my case, I'm gonna say get component in children interact, because if you see, interact is a script we made in the previous video, and it is used to pick the item up, and we have it in each of the playable characters and not on the uh, game manager, which is the parent of all the child characters. And you can go ahead and use the get component interact instead of get component in children if you have just one player. And this is because here the game manager is just a empty game object. It doesn't move. It is static on the scene, so we don't really get the position where the child or the playable character is set when we take get component interact. And again, this is just because I have multiple playable characters. And you can also go ahead and check video on setting up character selection, which I have done in the past, and I'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to do that. But just saying it again, like if you have just one playable character, you just gotta do get component interact instead of get component in children interact. And we are just gonna have x axis. On the y, I'm just gonna add a offset of 3 and an offset of 3 on z as well. Otherwise, the game object is just gonna drop on the character's head. And here we just go ahead and say spawn pickup, pass in the item and the drop location. And yeah, that's about it. So let's delete that because we don't need those. Yeah, as well. And now let's go back into Unity and see if our character is able to drop the items onto the scene. So guys, here in the game mode, if we open up our inventory, we got a sword and a shield already, which we had set up in our previous video. So that's okay. And now let's just try dropping the shield onto the scene, and you can see a new treasure chest has spawned up in scene, and it has been removed from the inventory. Now let's pick this up and let's say move towards here and try to pick this up, and ooh, we got a sword. And let's just try to pick these all the boxes up. Another shield, and yeah, we got a last sword. So now let's just try dropping them out onto the scene. So if you see, there's a treasure box spawned on the scene, which was not there until we dropped it from our inventory. Let's try once more. Let's drop the sword. And yeah, there's another treasure box spawned over here. And even if we change the character now, we have the same inventory, because that's pretty much what we would expect. Like, even though we can play as different characters, we should always have the same inventory, not separate inventory for different characters. So that's okay. Now let's try dropping a sword onto the scene right here, and you can see the treasure box has spawned over here. And now let's also just pick that up to make sure that it is still a sword. Yeah, and it is. And you can even select any of these characters. And this is just for those who have from followed me from the setting up the character selection. So yeah, even if we take this character, we can still drop uh item from the inventory, and it goes back to the scene, and we can pick that up. And if we change the character, it's still in the inventory. So everything is working fine, as expected. And yeah, guys, that's it for today's video. Hope you liked it. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, go give me a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And go ahead and subscribe to my channel. That would really be helpful. So until next time, see you. Bye.